we've been talking about methods for acquiring knowledge, and the last one we talked about was by authority. And authority sounds like a really good way, but we talked about the fact that it may not necessarily be the best way. So this time we're going to talk about reasoning or rational method. And that sounds good, but what we know is that two people may use reasoning and still arrive at very different conclusions. And most likely both conclusions are not totally correct. An example might be if you say that males are better at math and Fred is a male, so by reasoning or a rational method of acquiring knowledge, Fred must be really good at math. But we know that that's not always true because we all know some males who can't do math, probably if their life depended on it. So that one is not a perfect method for acquiring knowledge either. The next one we're going to look at is personal experience. And we know that we can't necessarily believe everything that we say, right? Or that we experience. Our mind is a wonderful thing, but it may be affected by our past experience. It may be affected, and our past experiences tend to affect how we look at new or current experiences. If you've had a really bad experience, okay, so when you were 2 years old, you were bit by a small dog. Well, we know that not all small dogs are vicious. In fact, that's not necessarily true at all. However, when you see a small dog, your perspective on small dogs is going to be um, colored by that past experience. And unfortunately, it's very hard to get away from that. The other thing we know about our way of experiencing things is that once we've decided something is true and that's the way it is, it's very hard for us to change our mind. And so it's affected by blind perseverance, which is that unwillingness to consider any evidence that contradicts some strongly held view. Um, it's very similar to that principle of tenacity that we talked about. And people truly will not change their mind even in the face of very strong evidence that what they believe is incorrect. If you don't believe it, go back and read about the history of the early explorers when they believed that the world was flat. And even after it was proved that it wasn't, many people continued to believe that long past the time when it would have been logical for them to have changed their mind. Confirmation bias is another issue that we run into with personal experience. Social cognition bias, and that's in which events that confirm a strongly held belief are more readily received and remembered, and anything that disconfirms our experience are likely to be ignored or forgotten. So you may run into 20 sweet little ankle biters, but you're never going to forget that one time that you were bit by a small dog. And most people will ignore all of those sweet puppies and only remember the bad experience. So the other thing that we run into with personal experience is that past experiences may be misremembered. You may forget that you taunted that little ankle biter into biting you. So I'm going to stop here again. I know that we spent a while on personal experience, but I think that that's one that is easy for us to believe is a really good way of acquiring knowledge, and for scientific purposes is not necessarily very good at all. So I'll be back in just a moment.